myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. It's Wednesday night and I've got to be perfectly honest, I've been out on the drink and it's the last day before lockdown in the UK. So if I make any slips or any mistakes, it's all down to me drinking 4 bottles of red wine with me mate Dave Beanie. So I'm not going to make any apologies for that because Boris has absolutely screwed things up again and we're all locked down for 4 weeks. So that's why I've been out to celebrate. But the main thing is George is underneath the helmet. Newworkwear.com, who is our sponsors for this month, specialists in the supply and branding of clothing for the workplace. George, can you move your head down? George, yay! There, George, you've done it. Well done, mate. George is the helmet of the day.
It's a long I can tell you. I was never even that in the bloody shipyard. Never mind. It's
the first time George has had a helmet on his head, but there we go, and that's no surprise.
No.
Because we're all like that on this show. qtechshop.co.uk as well, which is a lot easier to say and a lot easier to promote. Makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wild's-End in Newcastle. Big shout out to them. They make the t-shirts as well, which are available from newcastlelegends.com. And George, of course, spent £150, but whisper it quietly so his lass doesn't hear, for the food bank. And big shout out as well to the people who spent the money on the last t-shirt as well. Diane Byrne was the one who spent the money on the last t-shirt. Big shout out to her. We also had a donation from the person who finished in second place, and we've also just had a donation today from Darryl Laycock, who also bid. He's also spent £50 and sent it to the food bank. He didn't win the t-shirt, but he's also spent £50. So that's £100 plus the winner of the bid, which was 80. That's £180 for the second t-shirt. So we've made over £320 now on those first 2 t-shirts. So we'll announce the next one on the show on Friday. Honestly, big thank you to everybody who supported that. Massive thanks.
Steve, I hope people think about gift aid when they do these donations.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. 100%. It's nice to think of gift aid as well. So if you can and you want to do that, please do. So today, lads, we're talking on the Retro Show about Chelsea. George, your first memories of Chelsea Football Club against Newcastle.
Well, I've got a couple of questions to answer before I go into Chelsea. I've had 2 questions. One from you on the Amigo show saying, what was Tony Green like? And Tony Green was fantastic. And I've got to say, if you pressed us on which player do I think could have kept, who would have changed Newcastle United for the better, it would have been Tony Green. He wasn't just good, he was amazing. He had the skill, the passing skill of Shelby and Spades, but he had a big heart. He could go box to box all day long, and he wasn't frightened of a tackle, which sadly is what happened to him. He went into a tackle with somebody who was just a bit harder, and of course the poor lad knackered his knee. But if my view of Tony Green was, he's somebody that could easily have changed Newcastle for the years to come if we'd built the team around him. He didn't kick the ball, he caressed the ball. You knew he seemed to know where people were instinctively. So that's the first question answered. The second question was, I got a question to say, was my cousin Trevor true? Was that a true story? Well, it was, yes. I'll show you. In fact, not only was it true, the rest of the family knew. And if he'd been alive, the lad would have been happy to admit it himself. Can I put his record straight, though? He was as bright as a button. He one of the best lawyers in the North East and was nearly made a district judge. And that doesn't happen unless you're special. Smart dresser, 3-piece suit, cufflinks all the time. In the summer, Harris tweed jackets and cravats, absolutely amazing. So there were lots of sides to Trevor, and the Thai massage parlor was just one of them. But he didn't mind talking about that. In fact, he sometimes talked about it too much, because about 10 years after the Middlesbrough story that I told last week, I went to a function with my mum and dad, and he was there, and he liked to sit with me dad. And he used to say to me, I love getting beside your dad because I can have a couple of hours of real conversation because he knows lots about everything. Does that sound like your grandfather, Neil? He knows lots about everything. And so at the end of the night, I took them home. And the other thing, he liked Rome, and of course, so did Harry. So that's how they had a good rapport. I got them home, and I could see my father was trying to say something to us. And I said, what's the matter? He says, well, do you know what that Trevor told me the night? I said, well, I seen you in deep conversation. I says, it wasn't something to do about a Thai massage parlour in Middlesbrough, was it? And he said, well, in part. I says, well, what's the other part? He says, well, he said, it's good, but he says, when I like a bit of love, I like the took me back to keep my shoes on. I still had those on. I says, you're joking. He says, yes. Well, Neil knows my dad is playing, you know, he would just gobsmacked. That's the only way to describe it. That was Trevor. When I like it rough, I let the lass keep her still.
Anyone, George, I hate to say it, but anyone tuning in late to your comments there would be like,
well,
let's talk about Chelsea, George.
Let's do a little bit about football now. Yes. The opening thing I want to talk about Chelsea is September the 3rd, 1930. I couldn't I wasn't there, but it's the record crowd at St James's Park, and it was Chelsea.
Was Neil there?
No, I don't. Are you sure you only had 4 bottles of wine? 68,500 people registered as official, but any report you read says 70,000 in the ground, another 10 or 20,000 outside the ground.
And that was because of Hughie Gallagher.
That's exactly why it was. Hughie Gallagher came home with Chelsea, and that's why everybody wanted to get in. And it's that big thing about our number 9s, the sort of the magnetism they have on the crowd in the Tyneside. And they came back to welcome the prodigal son home, and he managed to attract 68,500 people in St James's, and they reckoned at least 20,000 outside of St James's. So quite a well, not quite a fantastic salute to him and to Newcastle fans. The other bit of Chelsea I wanted to go on to is 1951, and I'd go to 51 because for a number of reasons. It was a good match. We won 5-1, and another great crowd, over 50,000. But the tinge of sadness for me is you've heard me talk about my 2 uncles, John and Tom, who took me to football. Well, by now, in 1951, I'm nearly 10 years of age. I've actually got to the point where I just cheer our goals. I don't cheer the away goals. When I was younger, I was happy to cheer any goal. But this was the last match my Uncle John went to before he passed away. He went out and he was a devil for going out without a coat, and he got wet, and he got a bad chest, and he had asthma. And in those days, that was a deadly combination, and he only lasted about 3 or 4 days. And that was a big sadness after this game. It was 3. I said 5-1. It was 3-1. Milburn got a penalty and a goal, and George Robledo got a headed goal. Now I can remember being there and that being an important score, but the exact details of the goals I had to rely on my uncles, and my father and my grandfather were there because my dad was out the Air Force by then. And the Robledo goal was a headed one. And it was a headed goal from the edge of the penalty area. And you don't, even nowadays, you don't see those sort of things very, very often. So it was a one worth remembering. But the other side of it was who scored the Chelsea goal? Roy Bentley, another ex-Newcastle number 9. And that's another reason why there probably was a 50-odd thousand crowd. And the team looked like a cup final team. I've written it down so I don't leave anybody off. Simpson, Cowell, Michael, Bob Stoko, Brennan, Crowe, Walker, Taylor, Milburn, Ted Robledo, and Tommy Peterson. Tommy Peterson's a local lad who didn't do much after this game. But that's just about the cup final team, really. And my memory is that everybody was absolutely delighted with where this game went. And of course, not least because Milburn scored 2 goals. And they were able to welcome Bentley back, but made sure he didn't go home with a smile on his face because they got well and truly beaten. So that's 1951. That's the first real memory of, in my mind. I think I was about 10 years of age there.
George, there's been a lot about, football hooliganism in the 70s and 80s and the rivalry, and we'll come on to that a little bit later with the lads, I'm sure. But was there anything like that in your day? Football hooliganism did anybody want to chin somebody because of the football team they supported?
No, there were odd things in pubs, but you could get away with things that you couldn't get away with now. For example, I talk about me father, Harry. We sometimes, if I wasn't playing, if Newcastle weren't playing at home and the Mackhams were, we would walk through the Tyne Tunnel to Jarrah and pick up a Mackhams bus from Ashington and Jarrah bus station and go to the match at Roker Park. And we weren't afraid to let people know that we were Geordies, that we were, just there to see the football. And people used to accept that. I don't think you'd get away with that now. You'd be lucky to get back with your clothes back. And that wasn't unusual because there was a number of us used to do that. We used to meet in the Jarrah bus station. And as I say, there was a stream of Mackham buses come from Ashington and they always went through the Jarrah bus station. And we all used to hop on there and go to Roker Park. And didn't hide the fact that we're Geordies. We didn't wear our black and whites, obviously. Although a couple of times I made a mistake and they were playing Norwich and I wore a green and yellow scarf by accident, which was a bit of a mistake. But no, nothing. I can't, honestly, Steve, I can't remember anything like that where people even needed to be frightened. I mean, in recent times, for example, the other thing that upsets me now is that the last a cup match I went away with my brother-in-law to Walsall, and coming back on the bus, they decided to go into Northallerton to a hotel to have a meal and have a drink, and the hotel wouldn't even let us off the bus. So a couple of it were AA members because it said 4-star AA hotel. We got off the bus further down the street and walked back to the hotel and tried to go in and get our dinner on our own. And the bloke took one look at our shoes because the Walsall up your ankles in mud at the Walsall ground. It was horrible. And he immediately said, "Football out." And he was really, really nasty. Now, that's awful. It just is. It labels football fans something that we're not really. And you've all experienced that yourselves, I'm sure, these days. But going back to the 1950s and 60s and so on, no, there was, I never felt threatened or uncomfortable if we did something like that.
George, last question before we move to Steve Hasty. He goes, was the 1951 season when Master started looking over the owners and directors test for Newcastle?
Very good, John.
Probably,
Very
yes.
good.
Yes, probably. Except he was probably stitching up the answers.
John from qtechshop.co.uk, thanks for that, one of our main sponsors. Steve Hasty, good evening. Give us your memories, your first memories of Chelsea, please.
Chelsea are a strange club. I mean, in the 60s, they were one of those, sort of London flamboyant clubs that actually did nothing because they were in the shadow of West Ham, who had won the FA Cup. They'd won the Cup Winners' Cup, and then obviously 3 of their players apparently won the World Cup for us, So Chelsea were a strange team. That sort of Kings Road attitude, the flamboyancy, but they never really sort of hit my radar until the 1970 Cup final. To be perfectly honest, which turned out to be a great opportunity to watch football live because we got 2 games in a matter of 4 or 5 days. Because the Cup final was the first time it had gone to a replay since 1912, and I don't know how people are aware of that particular Cup final, but it was played on the most atrocious Wembley pitch but it was also notorious for two teams who were really just interested in kicking lumps out of each other. And if I remember rightly, the semi-final or the replay rather didn't disappoint, and Chelsea ended up winning the cup 2-1. But by the time I sort of like took interest in football and going to games and you know, being there on my own or being there, well, I'm staying on my own, not with my father, but with my pal Tony and Paul. We used to stand on the Gallagher end, and it was 1974-75 we played Chelsea. And I remember that for an absolutely raking goal by Alan Kennedy. I think the goal made it 5-0. Kennedy was playing left back. He came up and he hit this shot that just seemed to just continue into the back of the net. And where we were standing on the sort of behind the goal, the left-hand side, it looked like it was coming at you, you know. And then, of course, it was the net that stopped it. And that was sort of my first sort of remembering Newcastle playing Chelsea, to be perfectly honest, and absolutely hammering them, Steve. Absolutely hammering them. Battered them.
Yep. Okay. Good stuff, Steve. Stu, your first memories of Chelsea, please.
Well, a bit later than George and Steve, but well, nearer now. But when I was younger, I can remember Chelsea being a group of clubs with Newcastle and Sheffield Wednesday and West Ham. They were always getting promoted or relegated, and they were neither better than us or worse than us, you know. And at that time, our history was better than theirs.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't until they got taken over by Abramovich and they bought the success. And I'm very envious of that, and I really hope that happens to Newcastle in the very near future. But moving back on to football memories, is the first game I remember going to by myself. You know, I used to have to go with a parent, but it was 1988. I was still only 13 at the time when this game was played. And I loved that season. You know, there's always one sub at the time, but we beat them 3-1, and Mirandina scored a couple. But in that team, you know, we had Gary Kelly shaves his belly in goal. We had Rhoda, MacDonald, Davy Mack in midfield with Gaza, and Goddard up front with Mirandina. Kenny Wharton at left back. You know, there's so many childhood memories from that. So that 3-1 was probably my first real game. Well, going by myself or with my friends rather, with adult supervision. And I loved it. I loved it. You know, that season. No, we weren't brilliant, but we had some really fantastic results. And again, Chelsea were just neither here nor there. You know, they were just another team from down south at that time. You know, so that's my first memory of them.
Okay, Neil, your first memory of Chelsea, please.
My memories of Chelsea are actually absolutely preposterous and wrong. I have this thing in my head that all the way through the 80s and the early 90s, we lost 1-0 to Chelsea in nearly every game with a goal from Kerry Dixon or David Speedy. And I know that's absolutely incorrect, but that's like the memory that's in my head is being dashed by Dixon or Speedy. It's funny enough, one of my early memories of an early away game that I went to is the same season that Stu's talking about. We beat them 3-1 at home, and we went away and we drew 2-2. And I think Davy Mack scored an own goal, actually, in that game. But the same season, same era. And what Stu says is absolutely my memory of that as well. It's like we were in this group of clubs who were like up and down like yo-yos. But always seemed to play each other and always seemed to be together, but never really that much better than each other. And what Stu says
didn't
right.
fall over there, did he? He was answering the phone.
He's
answering the phone, mate. Aye. Drop his mic on mute because I think he's the one that's feeding back at the minute.
It's already been done.
All right. So, yeah, we've got this group of clubs that we were up and down with all the time, and we played sort of probably far more than we should have. But they were never really that much better until they got took over. And like Stu, it creates for me a little bit of, I don't want to call it envy, but it's frustration. It's like what we could have been. And it's this whole fact that so many people outside of the country
Yeah.
are obsessed with London, and I feel that here. You know, Steve would tell you when we were talking up in Zayed Group about, you know, all the stuff we did with them and takeovers and things like that. If we'd been based in London, it would have been done ages ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely ages ago. And it frustrates life out of us. And that was the magic that Keegan brought when he did the things like convinced Rob Lee that Newcastle was closer to London than Middlesbrough. You know, we need somebody around the club like that who can weave that kind of magic, because that's my frustration with it.
Yeah, I think you've got to remember as well that Chelsea were a club that ended up being bought for a quid.
Matthew Harden.
Yes.
Matthew Harden, wasn't it?
And somebody's asking the question about Abramovich. I think Abramovich bought the club in 2004. And of course, you look at that record now and you see what he's managed to do, but you look at the amount of money he spent. It's phenomenal, the amount of money that's been spent on Chelsea by Abramovich. But, you know, for a club that literally Ken Bates took over for a quid, and I think there were, I forget how many millions. It wasn't that many millions, but in real terms, that it was a lot of money at the time. You know, and he took them. And then, of course, you know, if you remember, he did all sorts of crazy things with he was the one who invented the full members cup because he wanted to generate more money.
Full members cup.
That's right.
Electric fence as well.
Yeah, he also put the electric fence at Stamford Bridge. Whether it was to keep the fans off him or not, I'm never been too sure. Popularity, he wasn't all that popular. And I think one of the legacies of his time is that is this business of the Chelsea Pitch Owners Club.
Yes.
But you know that again has caused the club continuous problems because they haven't been able to move from that ground without the permission of a very, very small number of people that he handed over responsibility or handed over ownership of the actual square of pitch. So they're a complicated club, always have been, and I always felt as though they sort of they lived above that station, you know, because of the flamboyancy of where they were. You know, the late swinging 60s and the early 70s in the King's Road and all of that, you know.
Yeah. Well, you look, I'm sure Steve will come to this later, with celebrity fans. Some of the celebrity fans, particularly from that era, I think are quite surprising.
Yeah.
No, they are, yeah.
And it all revolves around that whole swinging 60s because they're in the right part of London, etc., etc.
Yeah, and whenever any of the archive programs show any film of the 60s and 70s, especially the 60s, the swinging 60s, there's always a Peter Osgood in the background, you know, they're drinking with a Jimmy Greaves, who happens to be pally with a Bobby Moore, who happened to be pally with Harry Redknapp, and so it goes on, and you see all of these players that hung around together. But it was very much that, and even the number of managers that went through. I mean, it was Bates that really started that whole turnover of managers at football clubs, where you know you would sack someone because you didn't like the look of them. You know, you didn't get 3 results and you were gone. All of that. I mean, a slight exaggeration, obviously, but you know where I'm coming from. You know.
It's funny the comments that are coming in. Barry's just saying, is it true that he writes off debt every year with Chelsea because they don't make enough money? You know, Mitch, I'll let you come in on that. I want to before you come in on that, I just want to come in on this because I've not really said a great deal about Chelsea. Jasmine Black says, and this is the first game that I remember versus Chelsea. I remember a 6-0 hammering at Chelsea in 1980. Now, this is before I ever went to a game live at St James's Park. But he remembers Jasmine remembers the same game when Colin Lee scored a hat-trick. Chris Waith was left back, only his second game for us, and Waddle was playing, looking rather lost in that. And it was on Match of the Day, and I remember that. That was my first ever Newcastle game that I remember live. But go on, Mitch. You were going to say something.
Well, no, Abramovich is certainly prone to very creative accounting. There's no doubt about that. You know, when you dig into how the finances of Chelsea works, some of the things he does to shift debt around, for example, is very, very clever.
Yeah,
it's what you would call in that grey area, but also they do some quite curious transfer business.
Yeah,
and the way they've got with our squad at the moment, I think they've got something like 23 players out on loan at the moment, and they're making so much money off that, more than they actually pay out for those players at the moment. and so there's a lot of stuff, and that's been going on for years. It actually, when I come to my team later on, there's one individual in there who I don't think ever actually pulled his shirt on for Chelsea, but was a Chelsea player.
Oh,
And
there's a few.
In fact, there's two. There's
a few like that.
Exactly.
Andy Barr, I'll show you a team there now, so it might help the lads, because some of the lads sometimes they don't prep. They think, oh Christ, I forgot I had to prep me team. so that gives them an opportunity. But there's Andy's team, so we might lose that in the comments because that's the way the software is. But we'll give the lads a little bit of a chance there. John Melrose says 2000 FA Cup semi-final. I was at Wembley. I was gutted. The result. Was pretty happy with our performance. I was living in Surrey at the time and got the train back home. Yeah, I mean, it's funny enough, I was in the Back Page shop today, and we are going to do an interview next week with Mick Edmondson from the Back Page shop, because those of you who live in Newcastle will know that is like a shrine for not just Newcastle fans, but for football fans. You know, you want to buy a book, you want to buy a face mask, as we'll have to do now, but all of those things. Unfortunately, Mick is going to be shut from tomorrow, and this is his busiest time, and it's going to be an absolute nightmare. So I've been in to see Mick today. We're going to get Mick on next week. He's got some fantastic stories. Not only is the man who owns the Back Page in Newcastle and the Metro Centre, but he's also somebody who's DJ'd around the town for years. Mad Mick, as everyone will know him as, probably from doing the pre-match. He's written a fantastic book about his time following Newcastle, but I want to get him on because I want to point everybody who follows our show in the direction of the Back Page and say, look, if you want to buy a Christmas gift for somebody, please go to the Back Page, because they're going to be shut for a month now. This is the busiest period, and it's an absolute nightmare for them. And it's a nightmare for everybody, but we're a Newcastle United podcast, and we should be united behind certain people, and we should be looking after what we own. So I'd like if you want to buy a Newcastle gift for somebody this year, please go to the Back Page. We'll get Mick on next week. He'll give you the website, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to promote the Back Page from now until the 24th of December for free. So we'll want everybody to go there.
Thanks.
But, we'll move on. Yeah, you've got to. We're all good friends of Mick, and he's a great lad. And he could have played for Newcastle as well, but we'll let him talk about that next week. So, George, back to you. I'm going to unmute you because you were taking a phone call. I'm not sure if it was Noel Edmonds for phone a friend.
Probably.
But yeah, give us your next memories of Newcastle Chelsea, George.
Still on mute, Steve.
Yeah, George, I'll unmute you now.
There you go.
It was the Teesside police for the address of the tie centre shop. Well, the next, can I go back to the London Magnetic thing that Neil raised? It's not just football, though, is it? I mean, for over 40, 50 years, I've been going to Greece to persuade kids to come to Newcastle University. And I do a presentation. When you finish the presentation, all the mums and dads there, and you say, all right, any questions, anyone? What's the first question? How far is it from London? Every time. I could win a bet every time. How far is it from London? That's the question. Well, the next Chelsea memory is another home match. And in 67, we've gone quite a bit ahead. And the reason was it was another good win for us, 5-1. With a 35,000 crowd, but the height of it for me was 2 headed goals by Wyn Davis, and well, it was just like a skyscraper above all the Chelsea defenders. They just couldn't handle him. It was absolutely fantastic. But there was also a nice pile driver, as we used to call it in my day, from Albert Bennett as well in the 5, and another. Player that I talked about when we talked about Sunderland was Dave Elliott. He scored one of the goals as well, and that was a good memory because it really was a pace and they really did the Hayden. And as I said, Wyn Davis just stood out. He just showed why why he was what he was. So it's stuck in my mind because of that reason. I mean, there's been better goals. I'm sure there's goals we'll all want to talk about later. But those two-headed goals by Wyn Davies are something I remember for a long time.
Great stuff, George. It's always good to have you on. We'll get loads of people asking about various things as well from back in the day. So thank you for giving us your views. We're going to announce this on Thursday as well. Phone a friend, free, completely free. It's a campaign that we're going to launch. Everybody on NUFC Matters is behind it. We're going to obviously go into a lockdown tomorrow for a month, possibly longer, who knows. But we will be launching a video tomorrow on the show with Supermac and Gibbo. And we just want you to pick up the phone. Basically, anyone at NUFC Matters. If you know somebody who supports Newcastle, somebody who doesn't support Newcastle, just somebody who's a friend, somebody who you want to pick the phone up to and say hi. You might not have spoken to them for a long time, but we're going into a 4-week spell now, which is going to be very difficult for a lot of people, whether they're in Dubai, whether they're in Newcastle, whether they're in any part of the world. We need people to phone a friend, and that's what we're trying to push. So we've had a lot of support. The good news is that my little black book has come in very handy. A lot of people have supported it. We'll have a video tomorrow, and we're going to launch that tomorrow night on the Supermac and Gibbo show. So please make sure that you keep in touch with your friends over the next 4 weeks. It's very important. I've had lunch with a couple of people this week, and I've got to be honest, we've opened our hearts to each other, and it's very important to speak to people because we all look great on the outside, but on the inside, sometimes we're not so great. So please make sure that you speak to people, please. And if there's one message that can get out from this show, that's the one message that I would like to get out there. Steve Hasty, your next stories on Chelsea, please.
Yeah, I'm going to give Liam Kennedy a ring, just to let you know, to make sure he's okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will be.
my next memory. I'm going to try and do. I've got 3 games I was going to talk about. And one of them's already come up on the board there. That was the semi-final game. Went down with a crowd of lads in a bus. We went to a couple of pubs, and then we went to a third pub. And as we walked in, we thought, yes, again, it'll be another pub that's just going to be full of Newcastle fans. And sadly, it wasn't. it was full of Chelsea fans. And I think 99 out of 100 of them were certainly bigger than we were, you know. Anyway, once you walk in, you cannot re-walk out, can you? You know, you're kind of stuck because if you walk out, then the people are going to follow you. So we just thought, well, we'll just stay. So we got the round in, found a table, and then next thing you know, the sort of couple of tables came towards us and got together, and these Chelsea fans started holding a conversation, and some of them looked a bit wild and crazy, and I thought things were going to get a bit heated, and then one of them had his young son with him, and the young lad, they were just ignoring the kid, and he was a bit of a working ticket, you know, about sort of 9-10-year-old, bit lippy, and I suddenly noticed that he didn't seem too good, and they'd just been buying him pop all the time, and he had crisps and he had chocolates and all sorts, and he's shoving them down his neck, and then all of a sudden I just looked over. And I just noticed his face going blue. And I suddenly realised that he'd been eating the crisps and the Oz bar at the same time. And he started to choke. Well, none of them had noticed it. So, of course, first reaction was to jump up and grab hold of the kid. Well, at which point they thought I was going to smack with this little 10-year-old kid. I grabbed a hold of him, and as his father and his mates came towards us, I was squeezing this kid, and this Mars bar come flying out of his mouth and landed in the middle of the table. And I think it might have even landed in one of the pints, if I'm not sure. But at that point, I suddenly realised that the kid was nearly dying, you know, and would kind of saved them. Well, of course, my mates had jumped up by this point as well, and they're thinking, what's he doing to this kid? Like, it was all going to kick off. And things settled down, and before you know it, the pints started coming over, and they started buying what all drinks and thanking us for looking at their kids. They became our best mates. They took photographs, and then about 4 weeks later, the photographs turned up at the Strawberry in an envelope with a little note. Can you pass these to the Newcastle lads who sit in the window? You know, just memories of, you know, and like to say thanks, and to put a story into the pub about what had actually happened. So of course we got a bit stick off Caroline and and Michael about it, you know. but it was a strange one. But it kind of, that was before the game, and then going into the match and having, what was actually a performance at Wembley for a change after the previous 2 visits, and obviously the Charity Shield before that. And I remember walking out the door, and I was probably more disappointed after that game than I had been on the 2 finals, because that semi-final defeat really, I think, hit well because we'd actually performed, and we thought we were the better team. And of all people, again, just someone, Neil talks about people with, you mentioned Kerry Dixon there, Neil, and you mentioned Speedy, but Gus Poyet was another one.
Oh.
Absolutely just did your head in. He just had the hex on us during that sort of period of time, and of course, then he went to Sunderland as manager. But that game, and I think it took 11 years really. The League Cup game, the 3-4. Shola Ameobi performance, which was outstanding, and a marvellous result. And then we sort of move on from there, and from the home game, that 2013, which I'm sure somebody will mention, when Sissoko made his debut.
Yes.
And we actually thought we had a player. We thought we had
absolutely beasted Ashley Cole that day, didn't he?
That's right. The physique of the man, the performance that he put in, the battle, the strength, he seemed to have everything. And we honestly walked into that game thinking, after that match, thinking we had an absolute superstar and a steal at whatever it was, 3 million or whatever. And I think, if I remember rightly, that game was also notorious for, from the minute he walked on the pitch, Demba Ba got a hell of a lot of stick because he'd left us. And then I think Colaccini finished him off in the first half with a nice kick to the nose, which smashed his nose, and blood all over the place. And I think, if I remember rightly, the entire crowd cheered Colaccini for the rest of the game. We have some black humour, don't we, on the terraces at times, especially when it's something that happens to a former player who has left in dubious circumstances.
We do, and Stu, I'm not saying you're the resident hooligan on the show. I just say you've been like me. You know a little bit more. You know a little bit more about that life, like I do. And I mean, I wrote the NME from the Bender squad to the Gremlins. But let's look back at some of those memories. God, I remember them days when away fans used to get walked back to Manners Station, when fans used to get on the pitch and get ragdolled in front of the old Leazer's End and arrested. And happier memories when our lads used to walk down and take over the shed. Obviously, as I say, you can buy the NME book from the Bender squad to the Gremlins. It's you can get it in the back page shop online, so go and buy it on there. Happy memories, really, in a lot of ways for people, because unfortunately there is something that goes on off the pitch as well as on the pitch. Stu, you've seen it as much as I have on your travels. You're well travelled as a Newcastle fan. A lot of memories from going to those places, and they weren't welcoming places. Stamford Bridge was one of them. It wasn't a welcoming place, Stu, was it?
No, well, the first time I went to Stamford Bridge, a couple of people have put it on their comments, was a League Cup game in late October 1992. And if we go back to last week's show of the Middlesbrough, when I was talking about how we thought we knew we were going to get promoted that season. Well, after we beat Middlesbrough 3-1, when I said that's when I really first experienced hooliganism for the first time, we got drawn away to Chelsea after being drawn away to Middlesbrough. Our next game was away to Chelsea in the Cup. And I thought, right, I'm going down this one. And, you have a word, right? You toughen yourself up. And this is when we used to get the buses down from, we used to meet outside. I think you put a photo on it, Steve, a few weeks back outside the old supporter shop on Percy Street.
Yeah.
So at the Haymarket. Used to get the buses from there at 11 o'clock to get down to London. And it would always stop off at Grantham service station on the way there and on the way back. And it was just, used to pile in. No matter what time of year it was, everyone ended up with their chore ice creams and stuff. Like it could be middle of the winter and I've got a big feast. Why? Because it's free, So anyway, we're getting into London and the traffic was bad. And at the time, there was a song on in the charts called Baker Street. It was a recent rerun, like I'm sure you remember the originals and that, but we were on Baker Street, so the lads had been let's say full of ale on the way down, keep things sweet. And everyone was singing the song, and you could see the Stamford Bridge lights, but the traffic was late. The driver was panicking, and he says, "Right, lads, I'm going to have to let you out here. It's the only way you're going to get to the ground for kickoff on time." And well, it wasn't until we got off the coach did we realise what kickoff he meant. You know, it wasn't for the match, that's for sure. So we're running down the street. Well, I was there with a couple of lads. I won't mention them, but I was running down the street, and from about 50 yards, you just pick up this guy running towards you. A big fella in a brown leather coat on, his slick back hair like the Cockneys had at the time. And it was just slow motion. I thought, this is definitely going to happen. And after the Middlesbrough, I thought, this guy's going to batter us. And so I was running in between people, and they were running to get in their end. We were running to get in their end. And as we got close to each other, just as hard as I could, shoulder barge into him. I thought, there's no way I'm getting knocked over. And I've just put everything into this shoulder. Well, the lad, it's quite comical as it happens. He's, well, not for him it wasn't, but he went up, arse over tit, and landed on his back. And I've just turned around and I looked at him. He went, "What are you doing, mate? I'm only trying to go with the fucking game." He had no intention to cause any bother whatsoever. So anyway, we're getting the game, and I think it was Tom put on the screen before there. Chelsea used to always have like Robin Reliance in front of the shed end, and we were in the opposite end, which is now I think the Matthew Harden stand. But we were in the opposite end, and it was, you know, for us at the time, we're a first division club. The crowd for a Wednesday night game, the League Cup wasn't a big draw at that time. It was over 30,000. You know, it was a right tasty atmosphere, and then at the end we ended up getting beat 2-1. Rob Lee had scored. He only signed for us in the first leg of the Middlesbrough game before that. Rob Lee had scored, and we thought, right, that's us out the cup. We'll win the FA Cup, which was the Blackburn season as well. And as traditional, you get kept in for 20 minutes behind. So it allowed all the Chelsea headhunters to gather around and wait for Newcastle that was cordoned off. But a few of our lads had managed to get out earlier, and they were trying to get through the police cordon, and they got attacked from behind, and our boys were putting the windows out in the pubs behind, and the police just had to let it go. And for about 15 minutes, it was just anarchy. It really was good. Well, sorry, really was violent. And eventually we managed to get back on the coaches, and the Chelsea fans were very, very kindly decided to give us free air conditioning for the way home. Now, it was late October.
Always generous.
And it was bitter. So you're driving up, imagine driving up the A1, middle of the night, you get back home. And again, on the way back, we stop off at Grantham, and people are stealing ice creams. Like, why would you want that? You go down there with T-shirts on, you know, you're at the back, you don't wear coats on them. You know, and everyone was bitter cold. And you get back, and you know, you can hear the birds chirping as you're getting walking through the front door, thinking, right, you've got to get up in a couple of hours' time. You know, so that was that game. But because we're against the clock, I want to move on to two. A home and away game from one season, and it was the 4-2 when Andy Cole scored two, but one of them was an absolute snorter with his left foot. But what I remember from that home game was the whole crowd. It was bouncing. Dennis Wise and he used to get abused before he come up with Mike Ashley and all that. But him and David Speed were probably the top 5 most hated players of Newcastle for the last 30 plus years. And it was he's a dwarf which played to say smaller than you and me. But it was reverberating around St. James's, you know, for every time he touched the ball, you know, and I just loved that song. But what I remember of that game, I was in with Darren Park and Frankie, who I talked about in the Arsenal show, because he's similarities to Frank Spencer. And before the game, yeah, very much so, very much so. But they were in the Strawberry before the game, and he kept looking at this fella in the corner. I says, "What's wrong with you?" And he went, "I think he's a Chelsea fan." I says, "Well, he wouldn't be in the Strawberry, would he?" So I don't know how we ended up starting speaking to this fella, and his name was Gary, and he was from Crawley in Sussex, near Gatwick. And he was saying, "I've always heard about the Strawberry being famous, and I just want to have a pint in here." So I'm looking at him and thinking, well, you know, should I be belting him or not? And Frankie was taking a bit of a shine to him, you know, and he said, "Oh, you're like, you know, come and meet me after the game for a drink. And he ended up being a decent enough lad. We took him around the town, and he invited us down to his place the following season when we played. So this is where I get my revenge from the Aston Villa story, by the way. So we go down to, fly down to Gatwick. He picks us up, and we take us to his house, but he was living with his granddad, which I thought was a bit, obscure at the time. The way we were, well, anyway, the way we were behaving at the time wasn't very good. You're always respectful to elderly people, and you think, right, we're going to have to be quite well behaved here. So we go to the game, and this is when they just signed Ruud Gullit as a player, but he wasn't playing that day. And there was a guy that scored for Chelsea. He was that good, they named a TV program after him. Can you remember who he was?
No.
Dan Pet Rescue. Hey!
Get out.
So, Petrescu scored the...
You know where your code is.
I don't need one over here, do I? So he scored the winner, but the story comes where we'll go out with this Gary that we've become best pals with. And again, I didn't have a mobile at this time anyway. So we were going around to the sites of Crawley, and I think there was only about 3 bars and 1 nightclub. And the nightclub at the time reminded us of, you remember Dobson's?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like Dobson's. Like Dobson's, just a bigger version with mirrors everywhere and stuff like that. And it was, well, good, yeah. So Frankie at the time still innocently, not socially aware, shall we say, as we were. He starts wandering around, he's come across, he's going, Stu. I was like, what? He went, I think I've got myself in a bit of trouble. And as I've said that, these lads start coming run at him. I said, oh, what's going on here? And he's like, your mates just grabbed my lass's horse. And I was like, oh, Frankie, man, what are you doing? He went, well, I just thought she was nice, so I just wanted to tell her that. You tell her with your mouth, mate, not with your hands. So I ended up getting a fat lip on his behalf and a couple of grazed knuckles. So we had a good skinful anyway, and we go back to this Gary's house with his granddad. It was all like, shush, his granddad's in bed, we have to be quiet. Now, there was only 1 spare room with 1 single bed. And it was a case of, right, we'll toss the coin. And Frankie won it. And I don't know how he managed to win it because I tossed the coin. But anyway, he won it. And I thought, there's no way I'm letting him have this bed. So we kept up and kept drinking cans after can after can till about 3 in the morning. And he fell asleep in the armchair, which was the granddad's armchair. He fell asleep in the armchair. I was like, champion, I'll get myself up to the scratcher now. And I remember about 6:30 in the morning, Frankie's knocked, well, he hasn't knocked on the door. He starts shaking me shoulder. I woke up, what are you doing? And he's standing there with like nothing on apart from like his t-shirt. I went, I'm sorry, mate, I'm not this way inclined. He went, no, we have to leave. I was like, well, you've got no clothes on, Frankie. We can't really just be walking around the streets of South London with no clothes on. No, quickly, just come down, I need your help. I thought, what's he done? So my incident in the wardrobe, Frankie had fell asleep and did exactly the same thing on the granddad's favourite armchair. And he had his trousers lined over the radiator to try and dry them off. So, and he was like, help us. I said, I'm not cleaning your mess up. So he was scrubbing away and getting the towels and everything else. And by this time, the noise, although we're trying to be quiet, this Gary's come down the stairs and he's like, hey, what's going on, Ed? And we're like, he spilled his pint of water. I had a pint of water before he went to sleep. He always drinks water, and he's just dropped it over your granddad's chair, and he just feels really bad. He went, no, don't worry about that. So he starts wiping it with tissues. And I swear, I says, right, Gary, I says, thanks very much for your help. He says, I'll just have a quick shower, lads. Well, that was the last time we seen Gary. We were out the door, and we got a taxi to God knows where, getting an all-night cafe at breakfast. Then we just sat at the airport for hours in Gatwick waiting for the flight back. It was funny at the time. It was just the way Frankie was. I've had an accident and I had to be in the granddad's favourite chair. So I managed to get 3 out. I've got 1 more to talk about, but I'll wait till next time round for that because it's a sad one,
Stu,
which I meant to say earlier.
No, Stu, I want you to do it now, mate, because we're at 50 minutes. I think we're going to overrun the night because we do want to cram the usual favourites in. So we'll finish up with your story, Stu, and then we'll go to Mitch.
Right. The last one was when we got beat 3-0 at home from Chelsea in 2011. And it wasn't because of the results where they scored 2 late goals. It was because I was living in Lancaster at the time, and I remember on a Sunday morning, I was watching my mate's son's football team play, the kids under 11s or 12s or whatever. And he's come across him and, have you seen the news? And I said, well, no, not this morning. I was out last night. And that's when Gary Speed unfortunately passed away. Now, I know the lads know that I'm good friends with John Carver. And I knew JC was very good friends with Speedo. He was at Sheffield United with him when Gary Speed was manager there. When Gary Speed was at Wales, he tried to get John to go to Wales, and Newcastle, the club, wouldn't allow him to do the dual jobs. He helped him with his coaching badges. The families would go for meals together, really good friends. And it was my first thought. It wasn't like how he died or why he died. It was same as everyone else. Like, it's tragic because he was such a good person. And I don't think any people would say anything bad about him, referees included. Because I was living in Lancaster, I would drive up for the home games, and I'd meet up with the Heed and my older brother, and we'd go out after the games with JC and Stevie and Big Phil and whatever. And, you know, you tried to ring John, but he spoke to us and he just didn't want to. He was inconsolable, you know. One of his best friends had just passed away suddenly. And he's very emotional, John, as I'm sure you know. And he took it really badly. And at the game, hopefully you recall, Gary Speed's dad come out onto the pitch and he brought the 2 sons with him. And he asked JC to go with him as well. And I think Steve Harper come out as well. And it was a Sky game because it was on a Sunday. And it was on Match of the Day. So you've got millions of people watching. And I'm in the stands watching one of my good pals. I've known John now for 20 plus years anyway. And watching him break down on the pitch, his shoulders were going and everything. And there's nothing you could do to help. And you think, no, it's a tragedy in itself. And then when afterwards, after the game, you meet in the players' lounge and it's normally a couple of beers and then we'll go out. He just come through and he couldn't even say a word. Just hands were up and we knew that we weren't seeing him. And to see a good friend broken like that is really, really difficult. So this is why this phone a friend thing that you've organised, Steve, I think it's fantastic. I had a good chat with John on Monday. He's really chirpy about asked for his permission to talk about that story tonight. He's talking about Scotland. He's looking forward to next week's game when we play Serbia away to get a chance to get to the final for the first time. So it really resonates with me with the phone a friend campaign that you have on the screen there. You never know someone who you think is all right. Someone thinks, no, they're in control. You know, most people now have got WhatsApp with free phone calls. Just give someone a bell for 5 minutes. You know, how you doing, mate?
It doesn't have to be anything. You know what? We can all suffer from mental health.
Yeah.
We've all got skeletons in our cupboard. We've all got problems that we've got which we might think are unimportant. You know, listen, we're all lads on this show at the minute tonight, but on Monday night we've got all the lasses. We've got a good mix of people on these shows, but listen, we've all got issues, we've all got problems. I've been out and I've had a good drink with me today. I put the world to rights, and that's good because that's what you do as a human being and as a Newcastle fan. You go out and put the world to rights, whether it's about football, whether it's about your life in general. And you know, for me personally, I just feel that kind of thing is easy to do because we've got a wonderful platform. We're raising money for the food bank, and we're going to continue to do that until this show stops. And for me to be able to highlight mental health, but in a subtle way, so that we're not accused of hijacking other people's things, which is what will ultimately happen on Twitter. I think just phone a friend is a good way of doing it, and that's it. We're just saying from tomorrow.
Agreed.
From tomorrow, from tomorrow, phone a friend, because all we're doing is we've created a flyer. I have got a lot of me mates to put forward and do a video, and that we will release that tomorrow. And there's no money making option. It's a case of just us putting a flyer out, me ringing a few people up, Stu, and saying, look, will you send us a video and say phone a friend? And they've went, yes. So my connections will we'll put the videos forward. If they want to do that, I will put that out tomorrow night when I'm working with Supermac and Gibbo tomorrow night, and I'll continue to do that for the next month. So that video will get played every night for the next month, and it will hopefully help so many people who feel as if they're alone, because that's the whole point of it. You know what I mean? That is the whole point. And I feel a lot about that because, you know, listen, I'm Steve Wraith. Yeah, I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other. But I'll tell you now, guys, and I've said this many times to you when I've been, well, obviously not you, Stu, but to Neil and Steve. I've had times when I feel alone, and I've had times when I'm depressed, and trolls have got to me, and things have got to me. And for me, that's the reason I've done it, because I've been there, I've done it, I've stepped up a gear, I've gone to where I am now. I know how to deal with it. So many people out there don't know how to deal with it. But forget social media. There's a lot of people who aren't on social media. There's people who just are living their lives, who've got difficult lives and don't have anybody to talk to. They don't have a mobile phone. They don't have a computer. And that's listen, it's aimed at everybody. So I'm not trying to tell you who to ring. I'm just saying you will know one person in your life who you need to pick that phone up and go, hiya, how are we doing? And that's it. And that's what I'll do. I'm going to promote that for the next 4 weeks, Stu. And fingers crossed, you know, that helps a lot of people.
I'm going to say, Steve, it's a fantastic initiative. And I think you can only be commended for it. And anyone who says it's for any other reason apart from to help people, they need to have a look at themselves. They need to start ringing people and actually saying, do you think I'm right by saying something like this? It's like something my mother used to always drill into us, is like, it costs nothing to be nice. You know, and I'm sure we've all got an elderly relative somewhere who would just love to hear your voice. You know, 2 minutes, it'll make their day, it could make their week. Make that call. And I honestly, Steve, I can't applaud you enough for that. So well done.
Listen, I don't need applauded. It's a human nature thing. I took my mum out yesterday. I've been out with one of my best mates today. I took my uncle out on Monday. We're going to go into lockdown tomorrow. I'm depressed about it. You know, the gym is a big thing to me. I'm now going to have to start walking backwards and forwards to Newcastle every day for the next month. We'll all get affected by it. So it's not just you. If you're sitting watching this podcast tonight and you think, God, you know, I'm completely different to Steve, Neil, Stu, and Steve and George. You know, I'm telling you now, you're not. We're all the same. We're all human. We're all in the same boat. And if you know any of us and you need to speak, please just pick up the phone or send us a message. I don't have my inboxes open on Twitter for the reason that I get a lot of trolls. But please, you know, just drop us a message if you need to talk. That's the reason we're launching this, and it's going to be on for the full month. So please, let's just crack on with it. Neil, yeah, your last memories at Chelsea. We're going to overrun slightly, guys, tonight, so I hope you don't mind. I know it's bad for you and Stu because you're abroad. But if you don't,
it's all right, mate. It's all right. I'll chuck something into your phone a friend thing first before I go to my last Chelsea things. If you think you're in a lockdown, as Stu would testify, try the lockdowns out here.
Yeah.
Where you can't go out for a walk. You can't go to the shop and buy a loaf of bread or a bottle of milk. You've got to write an email to the police to ask permission for that. And that's what we had. And we had that for probably the thick end of a month. And so you want to speak to anybody who knows what a real lockdown's like, come and chat to the lads out here in the Middle East. Me, Stu, Steve Bennett, Andy Gibson, who's now in the Philippines because of what he's been through with getting his. Aye, exactly. Funny so's his.
After this show,
you know, give her a shout because we really know what it's like, and to the point where I get it. I had 4 weeks like that, and then I had to isolate for 2 weeks because a good mate of mine tested positive who I'd been out drinking with, and thankfully I got no symptoms, didn't positive. So I had 6 weeks where I had the room, the kitchen, and the balcony, and that was it. Yeah. And it's bloody hard. It's great for about 4 days. 4 days. You binge Netflix, Sleep as much as you like. We've got a thing called Centaurus here who deliver beer to your door. Sounds great for 4 days.
Don't deliver tissue, bitch.
Yeah.
After that, exactly. You know. So, right. Let's go back to Chelsea.
Yeah.
Semi-final has to be mentioned sometime.
Coming. Because Stu will know I've been chatting to a lad called Rob, who's a big Chelsea fan out here, who Stu knows, who we drink regularly with in Goodfellas.
I want to wait and tell a story about winding him up as well, but I've been
doing a bit of that as well. Actually, my third bit is a little bit about that. Rob's got a great apartment in Sports City. I think I've tweeted some pictures from it recently. He's got a bar, which unfortunately has lots of Chelsea memorabilia in it. And he's got his own pool table. And it's a fabulous place to just hang out and chill. And he's a good lad. So I've been talking to him about a few things recently. The first memory I'll bring up is actually relates to the 4-3 League Cup. Getting back to the coaches afterwards. I'll not name names, but anybody who was at Burnside High School around about the same time I was will probably have an idea who the wag who got himself into trouble was that I'm talking about. We got back to the coaches, and a few of the lads wanted the loo, so they nipped round the side of a back alley, and there was about 4 or 5 of them having a pee down the back alley, and somebody from the Met Police appeared, stuck his head round the corner and said, "Move along, lads." And this little voice down the end of the alleyway went, "Why, like, do you want one and all?" And then I've got lads running to me going, "Such and such is going to get arrested. What are you going to do?" And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Why am I the mother hen all of a sudden? You know? Thankfully, we were basically told, "Get on the coach and bugger off," was the final words pretty much from the copper's mouth. Not quite that politely, to be fair. Let's talk about that FA Cup semi-final, that Robert Lee goal. I was talking to Rob about it when I was round at his last weekend, because I knew we were going to be talking about Chelsea, so I was picking his brains about a couple of things. And as a Chelsea fan sat in the opposite end, because he's been out in the Middle East about 20 years, and he gets back in frequently, but he went back for that game. And he was sat in the opposite end, and he said he's never heard a goal celebrated so loudly for so long than that Robert Lee goal. And he said even he had the hairs on his arms standing up, listening to it. He said, "I hated every minute of it, but at the same time, I had to watch that and go, you know what? These guys want this." And that's my memory of it. Like, losing most of the skin off my shins on those bloody horrible wooden bench seats at bloody Wembley when we scored, you know, being piled on by loads of lads around us. That goal was a release.
Yeah.
And
Rich, is that because you looked like a bouncy castle at the time? So
possibly. People have seen the photos, like, aye, you're right.
Aye, I've seen them, aye.
That's what an extra 4.5 Clem will do for you, like, aye. But yeah, that's his one memory from that game. They won. And the thing he remembers from that game is nothing to do with them. It's nothing to do with Gus Poyet. It's about us going mental for 5 minutes at the opposite end when that goal went in. You know? And that's huge. And then the other one was actually our most recent victory over them, because we finally got the Dubai Mags together in a bar in Motor City, called Le Petit Bells, which is unfortunately due to COVID's now been shut. And the lad that run it's an Everton fan called John Gard, who's an interesting character, who's an Everton fan who used to run after the players at Liverpool, and he's got some fantastic stories. And he wanted some football fans in. He said, "Look, do you think you can get the Geordies back together in here?" And we got in, a great little bar with a great back room with a pool table and 2 big screens, and it was ours. And it was going to be ours for the foreseeable. And when Hayden scored that goal in the 94th minute, Robert's starting to come to watch the match with us.
I got photos of him, didn't I?
Aye. He'd started to come to watch the match with us. And then when that Hayden goal went in, all of a sudden, everybody sat on the same table as him. is having it large in his face, including myself. And it's sort of halfway through, it's like, sorry, Rob. Sorry, mate. But he, again, is somebody who has an interesting past with Chelsea and Soho, and he did a lot of the stuff that you did, mate, with the doors, Steve. You know, in and around Soho. You know, that's his background.
Yeah.
And for him to turn around and say, you know what, I actually enjoyed that match. I enjoyed watching you lot, and I enjoyed watching it with you. I think over the time, the times probably healed a lot of the stuff that we've had in the past, and the times turned everybody around to a bit of mutual respect. How much of that comes from our rise during Keegan? How much of that comes from watching would just try and do the right thing as a fan base over the last few years? And I think it's that, actually. It is you know, watching the fan base put up with Ashley and his antics and try
Bobby
and
Robson
rise
as well,
above.
to be fair.
Absolutely, and Bobby Robson as well. And there's also, and I think it's something we've not touched on tonight at all, that Robson and Mourinho connection.
Yeah.
That, you know, when Mourinho used to come to St James's Park, he always used to talk about he was coming to Mr. Robson's house. I'm going to Mr. Robson's house. And I think that's left something with the Chelsea fan base that makes our relationship with the Chelsea fan base very different now to what it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, I agree.
Very much so. And I still think somewhere before he eventually bows out of football, Jose Mourinho will spend some time at St James's Park in some capacity because he's desperate to work at Mr. Robson's house. And I think that does make a big difference. And speaking to Rob over the last week, that came up as well, that mutual respect that they've gained for us, mainly through Mourinho.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Okay, we're coming to the last 10 minutes of the show, shall we say, because George has come back. I know, George, you've been having a phone call. It wasn't from President Trump, was it?
No, not really, no. Actually, far more important than that, but never mind. Well, it was, I said to you before, Marge had a medical thing today, and she went to the doctor and just had a blood test. And that phone call was about that blood test. So you can imagine how...
Hope she's okay, mate. Send it.
So,
positive thoughts. You can have a big crack with Neil afterwards.
She's good.
She's good. Go on.
Can I go back to something about, it's not Chelsea, but you know, you're saying about things you could in the 50s and 60s that you couldn't do now. I'll give you another one from my father. We went to Joker Park, and we were a little bit early, so he decided he'd like a pint. And we went into a pub. I forget which pub it was. It was the one nearest Roker Park. So it was full of Sunderland supporters. And he ordered his pint, and he ordered me a Coke. And he's standing at the bar, and he picks his pint up. He downs the pint in one. And this bloke standing next to him says, and I can't do a Macam accent, did you enjoy that? And my dad says, it was bloody lovely. And the bloke says, so it should be. It was my bugger. Now, do that today, and there would have been glasses flying and all sorts of things going. And everybody just laughed about it, Steve. That's all, you know.
Yeah, but that's nice. That's nice to hear because things change.
Yes,
you know, like the 70s and 80s changed football, like the football terrace culture and the football hooliganism. And I think a lot of people feel that was always there, like for years, George, but it wasn't. It was refreshing to hear what you said before, because I remember when I had a post office in Felon, in Wardley, sorry, and I used to hear the guys come in and he used to go, well, I had a season ticket for Newcastle and Sunderland, and I used to go to both games. But that was part of that era. There was no football hooliganism. And
another bit of my life is that for 11 years, 12 years of my life, I was county commissioner for Scouts in County Durham, right? Yep. Now, everybody knew I was keen Magpie, but I had to be pretty careful where I was in Durham, where I spoke about. Half of Barnard Castle was black and white, and half of Barnard Castle was red and white. I went to St John's up at on the border near border between Cumberland and Westmoreland, the little village. The top was black and white, and the bottom pub was red and white. And yeah, I had to remember where I was when I was speaking, because otherwise it was easy to sour the conversation. But people didn't start throwing things and doing daft things, and it was never like that. It was never like that.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me to mention this tonight, but Istanbul, I couldn't even pronounce the name, especially not after 4 bottles of wine. Besiktas 2, Manchester United 1, and the first goal scorer for Besiktas, is that the right name, was Demba Ba.
Besiktas, that is it?
Well, no, it's
No, it's not.
It
It's
sounds like
another one, Dad. It's another one.
Sounds like you've got COVID, George, and you just go. Anyway, we're going to move on. Here we go, lads. We've got 5 minutes left. Let's test your knowledge of not only Newcastle and Chelsea players, but also Newcastle and Chelsea celebs. So here we go. So let's pick players who've played for Newcastle and Chelsea first. See how you do.
Oh, yeah. Hartford.
Hartford, yes.
Hartford.
Mick
I can't
Harford,
see these.
the man who Joe Allen described as hard as goat's knees is Mick Harford.
Gavin.
Peacock.
Gavin Peacock, of course.
Demba.
The answer's on the back of the shirt.
Yeah, Gerard slipped that game, wasn't it?
Is that Dave Besant?
No.
Who the hell is that?
Nah.
I knew this would fool you.
Nah.
No.
Oh, I think I've done it. I've got one. Perry Digweed.
No.
Perry Digweed was on loan at Newcastle United, but he also played for Chelsea. But he came on loan. But he also came on loan to Newcastle. Yes, I feel like I've scored a goal at St James's.
You should. I would be here a fortnight.
Is that Kennedy?
Oh, Kennedy.
Yeah.
This one, all I'm going to say is, before I put the photo up, lads, I've been at the Sunderland Player of the Year Awards last night, and it was a rollover. Steve, do you know who it is?
I haven't put it up yet, man.
But it's part of this guy's set.
Right.
And you've seen it many times at Nine Bar.
Oh, well, it must be Joe.
Yeah, it's got to be Joe.
Joe Allen.
Joe Allen, yeah.
Brilliant.
Scott Parker.
Scott Parker, exactly.
Damien Duff.
Damien Duff.
That's my team finished.
Damien Duff, of course.
Look, Remy.
Yeah.
I tried to fool you by putting long hair on him.
Aye.
I didn't put long hair on, but yeah, exactly. And this one?
Jeremy.
Jeremy, of course. Yeah, exactly. So it's not a bad team. So that gives you obviously the lads and lasses who've been watching it put up a decent team tonight. So I'll let you have a little bit of think about that as we go through the celebrity fans. So Newcastle fans might not know these, but you might. I'm hoping you've done your homework on Chelsea celebrity fans. So the first one,
Michael Caine.
My name.
Michael Caine.
Yeah.
well, I've got to say, lads, not a lot of people knew that.
Yeah.
Hey.
Seb Coe.
Guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sebastian Coe, the man behind a lot of things.
From Sheffield, Sebastian Coe, the big Chelsea fan. Oh, that's
Oh no,
Red
really, lad. Delaglio, yes.
Lalio.
Lawrence.
Yes.
Delaglio, of course.
Oh, that's
Dickie Attenborough.
Yep.
Dickie Attenborough, of course. Yeah, another one.
Suggs.
Suggs.
Suggs, yeah. Suggs. It's an obvious one.
Oh, Johnny Vaughan.
Yeah.
Johnny Vaughan, yeah.
Johnny Vaughan, of
We
course.
watched Johnny Vaughan, haven't we, Mitch?
Big breakfast fame.
Had a few.
Ellie Goulden.
Ellie Goulden.
Dear me.
Ellie Goulden, another well-known Chelsea fan. Is she or isn't she? Who knows?
Visit the match. Oh, that's
Guy Ritchie.
Yeah.
Guy Ritchie as well, of course. Another self-confessed Chelsea fan. So yes, well done, lads. You did well there. I'm glad that Perry Digweed.
You missed the chaser.
Yeah, I did, but I can't squeeze everybody in, George.
And Pat Cash.
And I've got to show Chelsea's ground because we've showed every other ground, and it's nice to see that Chelsea have kept their ground at Stamford Bridge. So there is Chelsea's ground. Always, as we do on this show, we always show the Three Amigos poster for Friday night, and obviously because we're doing it slightly earlier. Here we go. Are you ready, lads?
Go on then.
All I want to say is, hey, calm down.
Classic.
Classic.
Hey.
We just need Phil Redmond on from Brookside, don't we? Hey,
Brilliant.
calm down. That's how we're going to open the show on Friday, lads. Brilliant.
Can I have a comment about last Three Amigos, Steve? The last show.
Go for it, George. Go for it.
Great show again, as always, lads, and enjoyed it very much. What I want to was when you were at the beginning, you were talking about what people say about you, what they don't say about you, and how you don't care and how you're just going to plod on. The one thing you missed in all of that was the main reason is you get all that flack. Sheer bloody jealousy. Sheer bloody jealousy of people who would love to be where yous are. I mean, when you were with Amanda Stafey, there was 50 or 2,000 blokes would have loved to have had your seat, Steve. And you know, and the same thing with the lads doing the takeover stuff. It's all bloody jealousy because they can't do it. So keep at it, lads, and we'll all love you for it. Sorry about that.
No, listen, George. This is a platform for everybody to speak, and you know, this isn't about a dictatorship. It isn't about one person having one say. You know, my job is to facilitate anyone who comes on. I ask people to come on if they want to come on. They can come on. It's an open invite to anybody who wants to come on the show, and we've had a lot of people on. And you know, from our perspective, it's been fantastic to build this platform. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hate to say that we're going to have to continue to build it, but we are, because we've got another 4 weeks of lockdown, and it is depressing for everybody. It is massively depressing. It's depressing for me. I've got to be honest. It's one of those things which you know, I'm not used to, not being allowed to do what I want to do. But from our perspective, we can give Newcastle fans an opportunity to tune in every night at a certain time and an opportunity to do things. But tomorrow night we will be launching this, and I know we've preempted it, we've put it out there. Phone a friend, because it is very important to speak to somebody who you might feel is okay but might not be okay. So please phone them. Our video, which will be launched tomorrow night with the Super Mac and Gibbo show at 6 o'clock, will certainly push that message across. But you know what? I'm extremely proud of what we've done since March, lads. I count Steve Hasty, Mitch, Stu Penman and George as very good friends. And you know what? Everyone who watches, really, really thank you for tuning in, because we've created something special here. And yes, George, you're right. There are people who are very jealous of it, but who gives them monkeys? Who gives monkeys? You know, we're just here doing what we do. And me personally, as a person, I never lower to their level. I've been involved in this game too long. If you want to have a pop at me, have a pop at us. Good luck. We'll keep on keeping on, as
so to speak,
as certain people say. But listen, Stu, George, Mitch, Steve, absolutely great to have you on. Let's do West Ham next week.
Right.
Yay!
Does that
Right.
sound good?
Up the
Good
hammers.
for me. I've got
He's
a
only
great
a
one for
opponent,
that.
Lama. He's only
Are
a
we going to do
opponent.
our teams? Are we going to do our teams, or we're going to say that they've all been done? Because we've mentioned every player there's possibly can do, isn't there? There's hardly any. Hardly any.
No, I haven't.
Look forward to having
Yes,
Steve
guys.
and Mitch back on, obviously, on Friday night. I will be back tomorrow, of course, with Supermac and John Gibson. And then Friday night, it'll be the three amigos at the slightly earlier time of 5:30. And then we'll be doing Match Day Live because we've got a match on Friday. I have got a very special show lined up for Saturday night, which I will announce on Friday. And then Sunday, we'll be doing the worldwide show. But lads, absolute pleasure. I've done well on 4 bottles of wine, I think you'll admit. It's not a hard job. And a big thanks to our sponsors, as always, who are, and make sure you get underneath it. Steve, it's your turn. Duck. Newworkwear.com, specialists in supplying clothing for the workplace. Big shout out to them, and qtechshop.co.uk. Lads, great to have you on. Good night, God bless. I wish you well.
Cheers, Steve.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Bye, lads.
Love you.
See you later, lads.
Take care, everybody.
Take care, guys. Good night.
Week, Mitch.
Head back with your critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again.